Me?
Hello, hello, hello. Greetings from Poland. Yeah, thank you very much for giving the opportunity for me to present you something about Copilot Studio this time. I see that it's a bit different because you are more in like data driven, as I see, more on data lakes and so on. I'm not really in these topics. More in Power Platform environment and working in Copilot Studio a bit more now. Yeah, but I guess it's going to be something a little bit different, maybe as a short stopper, so to say.
Yeah, we are
Yeah,
here almost interested to Power Platform with
sure.
all component.
All
But
right.
last year we divided our bootcamp for more than 6 days. Each day is specific to a specific product or component. But this
Okay.
year, because all attendees are interested to Power Platform, so it is good chance to have many information and many
Sure.
insights about our Power Platform Bootcamp or AI, Copilot Studio, Microsoft 365. We just trying to share the knowledge with our attendees and make it helpful for all based on their interest. So
Sure.
thank you so much, Arthur, for having you today.
Yeah.
Today you will provide a great session as always about two ways to design your chatbot in Copilot Studio. Here you
Yeah.
are.
Sure.
The mic over to you.
Sure. Sure. All right. Let me share my screen then. Um, okay. I think you should see it now. Can you see it? Just to
Yes,
confirm that.
yes, we
Okay.
can see
All
it.
right. All right. So starting with my session about two ways to design your chatbot in Copilot Studio. So in fact, the whole Copilot hype and chatbot design thing is quite new from our perspective, maybe in your perspective, because we have this ChatGPT hype and overall this AI hype is going everywhere, right? We see a lot of news and so on and so on. But in fact, the chatbot design was with us before we even were thinking about this, because chatbots, in fact, in Power Platform were like for about I think 7 or maybe even 8 years, or maybe I'm wrong, but it is a few years, and Microsoft started with Power Virtual Agents, which in fact is a yeah building block for the current Copilot Studio. So it is building on the foundation of Power Virtual Agents. And now I'm going to share with you, in fact, the two design options which we need to decide on before starting to think about designing the chatbot now in Copilot Studio. And it is mainly related to like choosing between the full flexibility of Gen AI model, which we can use to leverage everything related to the chatbot design, and using some of the old but already good and well defined functions, the classic functions, which can be used to also create a very good solution. Okay, but before start getting into the topic, I'm going to share a bit about me, just a few words. So I have about 7 years of experience in IT. Before going to IT, I've worked as a teacher in primary school, so it's a bit a different experience. But I really feel that it was a really nice experience from the perspective of presenting the knowledge and also sharing with my clients, which I'm working with. So I really like the fact that I've been a teacher for a while, just for my own knowledge, and I really feel that it helps me a lot in my work. Now I'm Power Platform consultant. I worked at first in SAP system, so as a consultant of SAP system, and then I was transferred as an RPA developer. So worked in automation field from the beginning, and in fact now I'm also doing the same job. So like helping my clients to automate various stuff and optimize the work field, so to say. My main technologies include Power Apps, mainly Canvas apps, Power Automate, so automating with Power Automate, and recently also Copilot Studio, which I'm very interested in. Apart from that, I've also worked in Python quite extensively, mainly in the field of automation and also API management. So I have a bit of programming knowledge, which also helps a lot with the development of the apps. So I really like the fact that I have a programming background, and also some of the TypeScript. I guess I'm just maybe a beginner, but I know the whole concept of programming, so it helps me a lot to get along with TypeScript a bit. About the GenAI tools that I'm using frequently. So in fact, I'm using a desktop application built by one of my fellow colleagues from Poland. And I can use, in fact, any model which I can connect to. So I'm switching between Claude OpenAI models and Google Gemini, because Google Gemini currently is for free. So at least the newest version is a free one, which we can use without getting any cost, and via API key, of course. So I'm currently using mainly Google Gemini. But all in all, it depends on what you would like to achieve and what to choose. As usual, as with data lakes and so on, you need to decide on what to use depending on your requirements, on your experience, and so on. The same goes with GenAI tools. The approach is the same. So you need to also think about what model to use in what for what purpose. And also the hot topic for me for now is about prompt engineering, and mainly jailbreaking techniques and model limitations. So I'm trying to breach some things and break, and just for my understanding to know how to protect from that kind of limitations of the models, to avoid any data leaks or something like that. So for me, it's really nice to see when I break something, it is very satisfying. So so yeah, so that's what I'm doing now mainly, but not only, of course. All right. Getting to the next. So the agenda itself, what I've prepared, it's not really long, to be honest, because I didn't want to overwhelm you with the whole topic, because I would need to talk about how to design chatbots, how to prepare everything, and so on. I'm going to only cover the design, but assuming that you can, if you don't know, you can cover this knowledge out of the session when we end it, or if you, I will share you just a bit of information just for the people who are maybe don't know even the concept of how to build the chatbot. So at first I start with what we have now in Copilot Studio, so what we can choose between these two approaches. And as you might know already from the agenda, we have the classic design approach, so I'm going to discuss this one and the pros and cons of this classic design. Then we will go to generative orchestration approach, which is a new one which Microsoft introduced, and pros and cons of this generative orchestration approach. And at last, I'm going to share you, so to say, my verdict of what to do for now. What's the best option for now to not get so to say overwhelmed by the fact that we design something and then it won't work, for example, because that could be the case, because the technology is quite new. So I'm going to share some insights in that way. And in the end, we will go to the Copilot Studio itself, and I will show you something very small, just to showcase you what is the difference between classic and our generative orchestration approach. All right. So what we have now. So we have now the classic approach, which, as I've said, is the, so to say, the foundation built on the Power Virtual Agents technology, which is in fact something that you can build on based on NLP modules. What is NLP? NLP is natural language processing, which are modules for processing language, so to say, and it enables the chatbot to recognize what we are typing into the message box, so to say. So that way the chatbot can act on our actions and our messages, and that way we can work with it. somehow. So that is the main purpose. The difference between and going to the generative orchestration approach, the difference between the classic and the generative orchestration approach is that in the second option, the generative AI model is like so to say supervising the whole conversation. So we are not using, in fact, the NLP modules. So we are avoiding it. Instead, we are using the generative AI model to decide on how to act, what to do, and what to not to do. And that poses, of course, some advantages because generative AI overall is a very good tool, but also some limitations and problems which we will face due to generative AI limitations of the technology. So yeah, classic approach, so to sum it up, is the classic with NLP modules, which are recognizing the text that we are typing into the message box. Plus, of course, I didn't mention it about the generative actions, which enables us to infuse some, but only a small part of the generative AI to the classic approach. And on the other hand, generative orchestration enables us to use the full capabilities of the generative AI model so that we can use the full options which generative AI model gives us to like work with the chatbot. All right. And as I said, classic approach contains what? So everything goes around the topic. Then the topic is, in fact, is a building block of, I guess, every chatbot which we can define in any other technologies, because we need to always define some kind of like a an area or a kind of so to say topic around which someone a user can speak with the chatbot. So in Microsoft Copilot Studio, we have a topic which we will defining, and we have trigger phrases, which are a kind of key phrases which are invoking the topic. So when we define, for example, when we are saying like we define the trigger phrase which is an apple, for example, we define the apple, and when we type into our sentence I like apples, then the topic will run and something will happen. I will show you. I will show you also in the showcase how it works exactly. And in the topic itself, so we are defining trigger phrases. We are defining the actions which are a kind of helper functions, so to say, to get the data from somewhere, to post the data somewhere, to like everything related to getting some external actions with external APIs and so on and so on. We have also flows. So in fact, it's the same as actions, but we are defining a flow which does a set of actions, so to say. Also, we have redirects to other topics. So in the topic itself, we can define a redirect to another topic. For example, when we have a topic about what kind of fruit the user likes, then we can for each question answer, we can define a separate topic to have a separate logic for each chosen fruit. That way, we can modularize the chatbot design, and it is of course a best practice to modularize as much as possible to avoid any monoliths for the design, because it's hard to manage the topic itself. We have also conditions, which are in fact the logical conditions with we can define when something is like that, then we can do something else, and if something is like that, then we can do this. So I mean the logical conditions, and we also have, which is the new, we have also GenAI features, which is the generative answers with the classic approach. So we can use in some ways the generative AI model to help us answer some questions, or help us maybe fall back on the question when there are no trigger phrases defined for the sentence that the user sent. Then GenAI can go in and say like how I cannot help you, or anything else that is maybe connected to our knowledge sources that we have defined. Okay. and the pros and cons of the classic approach. So in fact, um, the pros and cons. The pros at first, in fact the classic approach is very reliable. And why it is reliable? Because it is a very often used technology before. So it is we have an experience with this. We know how it works, and it is not really unpredictable. So we can define very strict logical conditions, and it will just work. And we know how it works, and so on. So it's very reliable in that terms. Um, Stable outcome, no surprises. So if we define this like that, then we would surely know that it will go like this and no other way. So we can be safe that it will work as expected. We have more control on the chatbot's behavior. So depending on the topics, the trigger phrases we define, it will work as we expect it to work. So there are no surprises, no randomness, and so on. And the last point, which I think is also very good for now, is that you can decide when to use GenAI or when to avoid it. And it is, I think it's a very safe approach, because you don't need to always use GenAI. And I think it's not also good approach to use it always, because it's not always the case to use the GenAI answer. Sometimes it's better to use some kind of prepared answer from the developer, to avoid any problems with the randomness of the model, for example, which could occur, or some kind of different answers that we expect. So sometimes it's better to use GenAI, and sometimes it's better to use just the classic approach, so to be safe. And the cons. The cons is that, yeah, so the first, I said that it's reliable and stable, but the cons is that the logic is very strict, right? So it's the pro and the cons, right? Because if we have a strict logic, then we would need to define for each logical outcome, we need to define a fallback, right? We need to define if something will happen, then we need to do something else. And if not, then if we want to define it, then probably it will break, or we need to prepare some kind of fallback mechanism for this. So it is harder to prepare something more reliable in that terms, because we cannot always know what will happen after we deploy the chatbot or something like that. And of course, you need to define proper trigger phrases for your topics. So you need to work with the business to understand how the users will use the chatbot to define the trigger phrases properly, so that the topics would properly be triggered to avoid any problems and bugs. Yeah, each case needs to be covered. That I've covered already. And yeah, of course, that means that it's less flexible in general. So when we have a strict logic, then it's less flexible. We cannot do anything about this. All right. And the next one is, okay, generative orchestration, on the other hand, is yeah, we have a GenAI model, which in fact is working on everything that we have in the platform to define how to answer the user. So we are using the GenAI model to help us define how to act on the user message. And it is very nice to see that the model can decide. For example, sometimes you need when the user asks about, yeah, I would like to create an order in SAP system. Then when we have the topic defined, for example, which has a proper description, it can run the topic and do everything. So instead of using the trigger phrases, which were before in the classic approach, we are using the topic description to run the correct topic to act on the logic that we have. So we are using the GenAI model to decide on what to use, when, and where. And in this case, instead of, as I've said, instead of trigger phrases, which we've used before, we have topic descriptions. And these descriptions are used by the GenAI model to decide on what topic to use on what option, depending on the query from the user. And of course, we have flows. so that the GenAI model can use a flow if we of course properly describe it, what it does, and so on and so on. It can also choose it depending on the user query. We have knowledge, we have data sources, instructions, and all those things are influencing the GenAI model behavior, so that we can prepare a solution which is working on a fully on the GenAI model option. And the pros and cons of the generative orchestration. So the pro is that it is very flexible in terms of functionality. So you don't need to cover each conditional logic, so to say. So you can leave some room for improvement, so to say. So it is like you have it more flexible. When someone would answer something different, there is a higher chance that it will receive the user will receive the correct answer. So it is very flexible in terms of functionality. We have full Gen AI capabilities, so it can work on various data sources, choose the right topic, choose the right action, fill out the inputs, and process the outputs of an actions, and so on and so on. So we have full Gen AI. We can use full capabilities of Gen AI model, and the conversation itself feels much more natural if we are using, if we correctly define and configure the topics. We can make it more natural, so that you don't always receive the same maybe question or the same message that's usually is the case when we are using the classic chatbot, right, where we have a predefined answers. So it feels a little bit more natural, which I think is also good. And you can also define the chatbot's behavior, the full behavior, by using the system prompt, so general instruction sections. You can also do it in the classic approach, but it is only related then to the generative answers node of the topic. So it is not a full, it cannot instruct the full chatbot behavior because it's a classic approach, but only a part about generative answers. And in the generative orchestration, you can define the full behavior of the chatbot via the system prompt general instruction sections when we have generative orchestration approach defined. Of course, and the cons is less predictable results. So due to randomness of the Gen AI overall, we cannot be 100% sure how it will behave in the future, right? So if someone would answer, for example, we have a chatbot for order management in the SAP system, and there will be a user which will ask, "What's your name?" For example, just as an example, then the result could be less predictable. It could break something, and so on and so on. So we always need to cover the fact that Gen AI model is model based on the randomness on the statistics. So we need to keep that in mind and think about if it's good, for example, to make it public if we are using generative orchestration, because there will be a lot of cases where someone would like to break it or something like that. So it's always good to think about this if it's good to use like that. Of course, and then if it's random, then it's hard to test and verify if it will work, because we cannot be 100% sure that everything will work as expected for all cases. So we need to keep in mind to have a field of randomness. So we need to keep that in mind, that it's there could be some randomness in the answer in the future when we deploy the chatbot. And of course, you need to work carefully to make sure the chatbots won't get manipulated. There are cases where, of course, in Microsoft Copilot Studio, we have a lot of content filters which are helping us to not break anything. But nevertheless, there still could be the case that the chatbot would get manipulated for example, to leak out our data sources or what it is using to get the data, and so on and so on. So it is very important to keep that in mind as a risk of the generative orchestration approach. And the last part is that currently only English language is supported. So in fact, when we are using the generative orchestration approach, the main language of the chatbot which we can use is only English. So we cannot choose any other language. Of course, there could be the case, it is possible to overcome this somehow. For example, by instructing the model to use, for example, only Arabian language or something like that. So because generative AI models are in general multi-language models, right? They can speak many languages. So it is possible, but it will not always work. And I feel that we should wait for other languages which are going to be defined by Microsoft later in the future. All right, and that's how it looks like when we define generative orchestration approach. As you can see here, I've just highlighted that, for example, the triggered by agent, and we have a strange word called preview here. I think that it's very important to understand what is preview in Microsoft terms, because I feel that we are using a lot of preview features, but we don't know that that preview features are in general not recommended for production workloads. So if we see something like that something is here we see a preview, then we should run away from this if we are preparing something for the client for production, because otherwise there could be the cases that, for example, something could be like not used anymore by Microsoft, so they can just like delete it from the functionalities of the Copilot Studio. There could be the cases that the data privacy rules are different for preview features, and that's what Microsoft states also in their docs. I can send you the link if you like. And there are also other limitations with the preview feature, so it is very crucial, especially in Copilot Studio. If you see something like that something is preview, then for production workloads, I really recommend you to avoid this, because otherwise there could be the case that something will break in the future, and everyone will get frustrated. So best to avoid. Of course, it's great to test it out, but there are many cases that and things that it won't work correctly, in fact. So it's best to avoid this. All right, and the last point, my verdict for now. For now, it's best to stick to the simplest scenarios. At least try generative orchestration. So I think that because it's generally available now as a feature, I think that it's good to try out for simple scenarios, like some simple chatbot for internal expectations, like when you have something, a small knowledge base. I really feel that it could be good to test out the generative orchestration approach. And for advanced use case, I really feel that we should stick to the classic approach of GenAI infused, because it's really more stable approach. We can stick to the classic used to technology, and we can avoid any surprises in the future with GenAI randomness and GenAI and preview features which are related to the generative orchestration. So for now, stick to the mainly to the classic approach, and in case you have something simple, try generative orchestration. To be honest, because yesterday I've also tested generative orchestration a bit, because I mainly worked in the classic approach. At first, in the verdict slide, I've decided to make it like use the classic approach because it's safer, better, and so on. But I've seen that the generative orchestration approach works quite well, to be honest, and that's why I've switched the verdict a little bit to I feel that it's good to try out with generative orchestration with simplest scenarios, but you need to be aware about the preview features and to avoid the preview features if you see anything like that. So it's less safer in terms when you would like to build something regarding generative orchestration. But if you have something simple, then I guess it's good for the experience and also to understand how it will work in the future, probably, because that's probably the future of the chatbot design overall. it's good to test it out. All right, and at the end of my presentation, I'm going to now to share you some showcases which I've prepared. Let me look down into. I see there are some questions. I'm going to answer them just right after the showcase. So I'm going to be quick because I see that there are some questions which are quite extensive. So just a quick look on the classic approach and generative orchestration approach in the Copilot Studio. So here you see the designer for the beginners. In fact, I think it's quite easy to grasp because everything is quite simple to see. You see here overview, knowledge, topics, actions, activity, analytics, channels. What is most interesting for us is the topics. And here, as an example, when we would like to, for example, define the design approach that we would like to have in our chatbot's design, then we need to go to the settings, which I've done now, and to generative AI. And here we can choose the classic approach. So use the topics to build to trigger phrases and actions, and use generative AI to respond with best combinations of actions, and so on. So that's how you can decide on what to use, and how it works in the classic approach. So the classic approach is very straightforward. There are some system topics defined to help you in case anything wrong happens, like when something is not working as expected and so on. There are some like fallback topics here to help you out in case something won't work for you. So that's why it's a bit safer. I've defined a topic here called untitled, which contains it runs on the trigger phrase test. So when I type into test, you will see that it will run, and that's how, in fact, classic approach works. So we define the trigger phrases, and the topic runs, and we can use some actions. I've also defined for the knowledge of the chatbot. I've defined it as an article about orchestration, about generative orchestration from Microsoft Learn docs, but it is in a TXT file, just for it to be better for the chatbot to sum it up. So here I have untitled topic with a trigger phrase test, and now here is the action create generative answers. So it's the GenAI infused option with the classic approach. So sometimes we can use generative answers, sometimes we can omit it if we like. That's our decision. So it's very good that we have this option to decide on. And I've asked it what's the summary of this article. So here it has the knowledge source, which is the article that I've mentioned. And now when the topic will run, then it will sum up the article that is defined. And when I type into test, you can see here that it ran, and in a while it will show up the summary of the article. In fact, that's how it works in the classic approach. So we define the topic, we define the trigger phrases, and we decide when to use generative answers and when not. We can have a set of other actions, like as you can see, there are quite a lot of them. HTTP requests, ask a question, so we can define a question here. We can ask the user something and then act on the answer of from the user which we define. So that's how it works. And in the generative answer orchestration approach, on the other hand, it works a bit different. We have the same chatbot, but with generative orchestration, which is on, and with the same knowledge base which we had. So we have this article which I've mentioned. There are some instructions here which I've prepared for the chatbot, so that the answer will be a little bit better. I've also defined I've not defined the topic. I'm sorry. I've not defined the topic for this case, so I'm going just to answer chatbot the question like about this article. So what's generative orchestration? As you can see here, probably you already noticed this, that as you can see, you can, for example, ask a question to the chatbot, and it will ask depending on our query. So, for example, I've asked about what's generative orchestration, and it decided to search for the knowledge sources which he has defined, and answer the question which I've defined for him. As you can see here, it answered in Dutch, and that's because I've instructed it to always use Dutch to answer the answer, even if the user is using a different language. So this instruction helped me like receive the output in Dutch language, even though I've asked in English, and the knowledge is also in English. So as you can see, it's possible, but it's a little bit more risky because yeah, that's there could be some issues with translation and so on and so on. So we need to keep that also in mind. Yeah, so that's how it works. And the difference, as you've seen, is that in the classic approach, I needed to first run a trigger phrase, for example, test, and then it ran the topic. And in the generative orchestration approach, I could ask just a question, and it will act depending on the question, on my query, and so on and so on. Let's just as an example, I ask a totally different question, just out of the scope. And here you can see, for example, when I've asked about what's your name, it decided to use a topic called greeting. So that's what it decided. And of course, it depends on the topic description that you tell it here. So depending on the topic description, it decides on what topic to use to act on the user. So that's how it works in a nutshell, so to say, because it is of course more complicated, but just wanted to highlight the main differences between the two tools. All right, I guess that's all, because I've seen a lot of questions. So I am going to now try to answer everything. Let's start with the first one. Unfortunately, I cannot answer. I cannot understand the name because it's in Arabic alphabet, so I cannot understand it. But can I build agents using Copilot Studio or just the chatbot? And so, in fact, I will ask the same question: what is the difference between the agent and the chatbot? So, because currently that it changes a lot. So the agent overall, that's how they define it, is something more than a chatbot with GenAI infused knowledge, so to say. So an agent can act on various knowledge sources, and prepare some answers and so on. But in fact, here in Copilot Studio, we can also define an agent, so to say, which is practically the same as chatbot, but with GenAI, with some GenAI technology inside. So it's just a term, right? We can use chatbot, or we can use an agent. Of course, I feel that agent is a more broad term, because an agent can also not be a chatbot, so to say, because there could be the case that we are not using a chatbot interface for an agent, but the agent works independently, so to say. So maybe that's the question that you would like to ask. Currently in Copilot Studio, it's not possible to make a fully independent agent, so it can act without user interaction. Of course, there are event triggers which are in preview currently, but I really do feel that it still is not ready yet for like production workloads. So you can test it out and see how it will work. For example, when a Dataverse row is created, it can act on something like prepare a summary or something like that. But it's really early, so we need to be a little bit patient in terms of this technology to avoid any problems in the future. Because if you prepare something which is not reliable, then it doesn't make sense really. So we need to stay safe a little bit in that kind of technology. All right. Is Copilot Studio now a replacement for Power Virtual Agents? Yes, that's true. It's in fact the same thing, but with Gen AI infused, as I've said. So they've prepared a new licensing model also, because the previous model wasn't really good, I feel. So it's just a replacement for Power Virtual Agents. How can Copilot Studio bots integrate with external systems? So we have a set of, so we can use a flow to integrate with external system with a connectors which we know already, right? When we're using Power Automate, we can use actions which are in preview now. There are also agent flows, which is it is in fact the same thing as Power Automate, but with a different front end, but in Copilot Studio. So they are trying to sell us the same thing, but with a different packaging, so to say. Apart from that, there are also HTTP requests actions, which you can also define in the topic itself to integrate with external systems. What more? Yeah, I think that mostly that's all, and that's the main that are the main approaches that you can use to integrate with the external systems. How does Copilot Studio ensure secure access to backend data sources? So Copilot Studio itself uses, when we are using the Microsoft connectors, for example, it uses the same approach as Power Automate and Power Apps. So we are using the connectors to connect to various data sources. For example, if we are using Dataverse, we are using the Dataverse connector, right? When we are using Outlook 365, we are using Outlook 365 connector to connect to the backend data sources. So that depends on the data source which you are using. Of course, if you are using some custom data source, like when you have an API which is defined in an internal API, then it is your case to define it properly so that it is secure, right? So it is your case to think about this. But if you are using out-of-the-box connectors, then it is secure as Power Automate and Power Apps is secure. So I really feel that it is secure, of course. The best way to integrate Chatbot with my website. Oh, well, it is a very broad topic because that depends on what your website is, how it's being built, what is your expectation in terms of how it should work. The easiest approach is to use an iframe, which I can also show you. When we have a chatbot, for example, let me share my screen again for a while. When we have a chatbot here, in the channels tab, we can define where it should be published, right? And if we have, it also depends on the security settings which we have defined. If we have Microsoft authentication setting on, then it won't be possible to share it with external website, because the chatbot needs to be public for the external website for it to work. Apart from the fact that you can also define a custom option to custom authentication methods to like authenticate with the chatbot on your custom website, and you can manage the security settings here. Here in the authentication, you can choose no authentication. Then the chatbot is everywhere where you define it, and you don't need any authentication to chat with it. Authenticate with Microsoft, which is an Entra ID authentication. So it will work only in Microsoft related channels, and authenticate manually. And then you would need to manually define in your code a way to authenticate, and of course define the correct proper approach to do this. So like chatbot interface and so on and so on. So The easiest way is to use the public channel, but yeah, there is a risk that if you have any sensitive data, then it could be leaked, right? So it is best to avoid this unless it is good to use it. So that's how you can do it. Yeah, and using an iframe is very easy because when you click, for example, here custom website, I see that I have turned off, so I don't have public access. So let me switch it for a while. Authentication, no authentication, save. Yeah, there are a lot of mentions that there is a risk, right? So it is very important to understand that if you make this with no authentication, then the chatbot is, yeah, as it says, it is publicly available. So it is very important to understand this before doing this. And when we click custom website, here you have a sample doc HTML snippet, and here is an iframe with a source. When you embed it on your website, then it will show the frame with the chatbot interface. All right. Who are the competitors to build chatbot with a low cost as per your experience? So I thinking out loud now, if there are any competitors, to be honest. I don't know. I don't see any chatbot design, low code chatbot design platform for now to compete with Microsoft. Maybe there are some low code platforms which are currently investing time to prepare this, but but to be honest, I didn't also review it because I'm mainly focusing on Copilot Studio now. So yeah. So yeah, that would be my answer to the question. Yeah, I see that someone answered about MoveWorks. What is the license required to use Copilot Studio? We have two options. One is pre-built packages, and it is like $200 per month, and it is tenant-wide. So we have 25,000 messages per month. It's quite a big capacity, so we can use many things. But it is worth to mention that you need to deep dive into the licensing model because there are some messages which are counted as one message, then some are counted as 2 or 3, and so on and so on. So we need to keep that in mind. And there's also pay-as-you-go licensing model, which pays 1 cent per message. But it is in general, it is more expensive, of course. If you are using more chatbots, then it is worth to use 25,000 messages. So the pre-built package. All right, I guess that's all from my side because I see there are no questions. So thank you very much.